10 years old, I used to collect ads from the glossy newspapers that used to come only on Sunday at that point of time, and magazines. And that, I think, was the beginning of my obsession with wanting to be in advertising. And as a 10-year-old, I didn't know what advertising was, neither did my family. And it was all about what happens and who's the person creating this. And it was that when I grow up, I want to be this person who's creating these ads. And that, I think, was somewhere embedded so deeply in my mind that whenever my mother said, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? And then at a time that we were born, everybody was either an engineer or a doctor, or you were a lawyer or you were a chartered accountant, and there was no other profession other than these four which were considered to be success. So somebody who's 11 or 12 or 13 telling their mother that, no, I want to be in advertising, I want to do this, was an out of the box kind of a thing. And always the question was, but why can't you do what has been told for you to do? And I would always say, but why can't I do what I want to do? And that's where I think the whole beginning of the story of my life comes from. So the story is not so much about the whys, because whys are very important. Academically, I don't think I'm a great example to be standing on this stage at all, because I never excelled in my studies, nor was I the person who got the first, I was not the first ranker in my classroom. In fact, I was the naughtiest child, and I was that child who would always look for excuses to be outside the classroom rather than inside the classroom. So from a school's perspective, not an ideal that I'm standing here in front of you. But what really did matter was that the things that I liked, the things that I was passionate about, even as a child, I would put all my heart and soul to want to know more about it. And the more necessarily did not come from the textbook. It came from everywhere around. It came from questions, it came from playgrounds, it came from talking to friends, it came from storybooks, it came from so many places. So education may happen, literacy is a matter of knowing the word and knowing the number, but education actually happens when we broaden our perspective by being curious about things and knowing the why about things. And that's where I think the perspective of why comes in. But if you need to take your why a step further, always challenge it with your why not. Because why is about logic, why is about process, why is about curiosity, but why not is about courage. Why not is about surprise. Why not is about self-belief. And that step from moving from the why to why not can actually make you achieve your dreams and set a direction for your life. So start with scrapbooking your dreams. I did that. I mean, I had a scrapbook and I put all the ads into that scrapbook. My mother used to tell me much later that I didn't know that a 10-year-old could actually figure out that what she wanted to do in life. But I think it was just about being obsessed about the fact that I want to do this, and I had it in front of me like pictures, and then I made my way into it. Then there was no Rhonda brand, there was no secret, there was no manifestation. We didn't know these words. But I think if that was to be applied in today's age and time, a lot of those words would probably actually attribute to it to say that, oh, you manifested your future because you saw your future and you stuck your future on a piece of paper. But that's where it is. The second thing is, when I came into my profession, at a certain stage of life, life happens, things change, things don't go as per plan. We may have, I mean, this was a dream I dreamt from childhood, but when I came into my adulthood and I started practicing it, it was not all rosy, it was not really a path of roses, so therefore there were challenges in it. And at each time that the challenge came thrown out, it was more about saying that, okay, do I want to stick to this and say that, okay, just because I want to be here, I just want to do this in this form and not look at any other modification of it? So I think that was a challenge that life threw at me. And in my life, what I did was, I wanted to be in communications as a business, and every little path of communications, even if it was not advertising, I kind of opened my arms and I embraced it. Because at that point of time, that was the need. And because of the need, I went into corporate communications. From corporate communications, went on to set up our own unit, which was into film production. From film production, then life again happened. There were some challenges in my personal life, because of which I had to go back into wanting a job. And when I went into wanting a job, the offers that I got came from public relations firms, and I took up an offer with a public relations firm. And that was probably the second or the third deviation of the journey that I had. So while I stuck to the industry called advertising or communications overall, I did deviate into doing other things in the realm of communications and stepped into another profession, which was communications, but very different from what I did the first 13 years of my life, and that was public relations. Coming into public relations, of course, coming into public relations has its own set of challenges, had its own set of question marks for me. I was on the creative side of advertising, which meant that I was writing ads, I was creating ads. I was never a person who was servicing clients, and I never had to deal with clients, and we were always the people for whom the red carpet would get laid out in client offices, because you were the creative team, and you were the team that was actually coming to relate ads like as if we were reading out poetry. So we were always welcomed with open arms, and the servicing people were always these guys who were out there to please the client, and the client and servicing team would always have some kind of a conflict there. So the relationship was very different in terms of who you were and which team you were a part of. And then when I eventually went into public relations, I ended up becoming a client-facing person. And that was the first challenge, because I didn't know how to deal with clients. I didn't know how to just make clients happy, because I think that is the primary goal of a client servicing person, that you never annoy your client and you always keep the client happy. So the challenge was, how do I navigate this? Because I always said what I felt, and it wasn't always the right thing to do. But then I realized that I can't change myself, who I am as a person, just because somebody else doesn't like what I'm saying, or somebody else doesn't like how I'm approaching it. So I decided that, okay, let me just work with what I know, and let me just try and figure out my solutions with what I know, rather than trying to please somebody else by trying to do things their way, because I would have failed in both those ways. And in the process, there were many things that kind of came about, and a lot of setbacks that did come about, to a point where after the first 3 months in my profession in public relations, I went one day crying to my boss, and I said, I don't know how to navigate the challenges of multiple clients wanting things, and nothing that I do seems to make them happy. And my boss, which I thought would be somebody who will be helping me navigate this challenge and give me a direction, he just looked at me and he said, one, I can't handle a woman who cries, and two, if you can't figure it out, then quit. And I was so shocked that, I was so dispensable that this person doesn't even feel the need to guide me and just tells me that you can just go and quit. And I went back home and I thought to myself that if I quit today, I will learn to quit every time. Every time somebody throws this at my face, I'm going to say, I will quit. And quitting is probably the easiest option in life. So I went back the next working day and I called my little meager team together and I said, I think a lot of things that I didn't know, I would keep going for help to somebody else, waiting for them to guide me. But after today, it's a promise to you, and it's an oath that we will take, that we will never go back into that room and ask for any help ever again. And I am grateful for my boss for telling me what he did, because after that day, to this day, which is almost 15 years in the profession, I have never gone and asked anybody for validation. I've never gone and asked anybody to tell me whether I'm thinking right, not thinking right. I've just gone and did what I had to do. And that has, of course, carved another path for me, and a lot more which laid out in the future for me. The second thing which happened where I was at the same organization, was we were working on a client program, and it was almost like 3 months of planning for this client program. And it was a very ambitious plan where we were doing awards for them, we were doing advocacy for them, we were doing a whole symposium that had to be planned out. And I had never done it in my life. And neither had any of my colleagues in my office. Not that if they would have done it, I would have gone and asked them, because my oath remains, that I will not ask anybody for help. So I brought my team together, young 21, 22, 23-year-olds. My team consisted of 3 members, and all the 3 girls were below 25 or 26 years of age. And I was the oldest. I was 35, 36 years of age. So we went about and we said, okay, let's figure this out and let's try and do this ourselves. And at the end of it, we had 45 speakers who were heads of different institutions in India, which are some of the biggest institutions in India, starting from NIMHANS or TERI or Tata Institute of Social Sciences, you name it, and those NCERT. We had heads of all of these institutions who had agreed to come as speakers for the symposium. We had 120 NGOs that we had contacted and brought them all together for that symposium. And there was this grand program which was planned out. The executive CEO of India, of this global company, which, his time is worth in gold. His time was blocked for this program because it was supposed to be the, marquee program of this organization. Everything was planned to an extent that I said, okay, why not just go and get the health minister to come and sign off on this program and be the chief guest? And so instead of the health minister, we got the state health minister, and who agreed to come and be the chief guest for the program. And all of this without knowing how to go about it. It was just that, okay, let's try and do this, and then we just went and did it. And it just happened. Manifestation maybe. But it just happened at that point of time. And on the one day before the program was to happen, the chief minister of a very big state died in an air crash. And because a minister was supposed to be at the program was happening in Delhi, and the entire media, which was supposed to be at my program, refused to come because they were covering the funeral the next morning. And all of this effort, which was for 3 months, without long nights and consistent follow-ups, traveling, sleeplessness, everything put together, came to a stop because something happened, and the program for which we were prepping for was at a standstill. The minister called up to say, I'm sorry, I need to be at the funeral, so I won't be able to come for your program. And then, of course, everything else started kind of falling apart. And we just sat there in the lobby of the hotel thinking what's going to happen the next morning. As expected, we were expecting about 100+ media people at the event. We barely had 15. And we barely had people who were of any significance. And at the end of the program, I just went and I sat down and I said, what the hell happened? And then my client, and I will always be grateful for the lesson that he gave me, he said, why are you even worried about it? You guys pulled off such a fantastic program, and this is going to pay us in many other ways. And it did. Because after that program, whenever we went to any state government for partnerships, we ended up with 4 state government partnerships for the client. We ended up getting 3 NGOs on board for a program. We did a Guinness record with a tie-up with the WHO and one of the state governments. And all of these were record firsts for this organization, which is one of the largest FMCG companies globally. And never before had that company done programs of this scale, and we just managed to pull it off. So setbacks sometimes can actually become setups for the future success. So never allow for it to stop you or to put some self-doubt in you that why did it happen? Why is a double-edged sword? Use it the right way, it is curiosity. Use it the wrong way, it is a self-doubt. So the question of why needs to be, it's a very powerful word, so use it carefully when you use it in your life. The other bit which I learned is we can get angry with people. There will be people who are jealous of us. There will be people who will play politics around you. There will be people who will pull the carpet away from under your feet. But at the end of it, never think about sitting down and wondering why did it happen to me? Wondering why was it that I was the victim? I think the best way to get yourself to be noticed, or the best way to kind of just allow any answer to come out of your life, is to let your work speak. Allow for your work to speak. Believe me, it speaks louder than anybody else and any other voice in a room. And when you focus on your work, when you focus on what you need to do or what you have to do or what is the right thing to do, eventually everything else fades out. It doesn't matter in the long run. And that is one of the biggest lessons that I have learned in my life. Whenever there have been setbacks, whenever there have been challenges, whenever there have been question marks, I have just gone about doing what I'm supposed to do, and I'm not allowed for any of that to creep in to question why I'm doing something or why these questions are being aimed at me. So that is another big lesson which I would like to leave behind with you. Also, challenges generally are great when you look at it from outside, but I think what happens when you constantly look for something coming from outside, it also translates into validation. When you're constantly looking for validation from outside you, you're going to, you will be defocusing from what you're supposed to do. So don't worry about what others are going to say, whether others have noticed what you have done, whether others have praised you for what you have done, whether others have given you recognition, whether you've gotten a promotion, whether you got a pay rise. Honestly, all of that fades into oblivion the minute you start setting goals and start setting goals which are challenges which nobody else can actually meet. And that is, I think, a big lesson in life where I learned that when I put the challenge to myself, it doesn't matter what other people put as a challenge to me. It doesn't matter what other people have set as a goal. And eventually the goals which I have set for myself have become my measure of success for myself. And even if for somebody else, they might think that, okay, you've done a fantastic job, but if I didn't feel that I did a fantastic job, it didn't matter. So the validation coming from outside should not really matter, because you should be setting validation and challenges for yourself, which are so big that you actually navigate around them and set a benchmark. And to that, it's important that greed is sometimes very good. And greed is something which can make you achieve success, achieve a benchmark which is much greater than where you need to be. One of the examples is the campaign that I did for Wix, which went on to become one of the top 3 campaigns of the world globally. In that campaign, my team used to come and say, but Rekha, client never asked us to do this, so why are we doing it? And I would say, it doesn't matter whether the client asked you to do it or not. Do it because it's the right thing to do. And then we went on to do it, and it became a campaign that was globally discussed as one of the best campaigns in the world. So greed is really good when it comes to setting goals for yourself. And like I said, be your own benchmark. Never look for benchmarks outside, because your own benchmarks will always be tougher to achieve than somebody else setting a benchmark for you. And at the end of this, I will always say that life and your wealth and your success is not a measure of what happens to you, but is the measure of how many why nots you decided to have in your life. So with that, I'll come to the end of this. Thank you very much for having me here.